Those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. This famous quote is a poignant reminder of the importance of understanding history. In this video, we will be diving into the origins and history of one of the most notorious political movements in modern history, the Nazi Party. From its early beginnings to its eventual downfall, we will explore the key events and ideologies that allowed the Nazi Party to rise to power in Germany and commit some of the most heinous atrocities that the world has ever seen. Through this exploration, we hope to shed light on the devastating consequences of hatred, bigotry, and propaganda, and to underscore the critical importance of learning from the past. So sit back, buckle up, and join us on a journey through one of the darkest periods of human history as we uncover the origins and history of the Nazi Party. The Nazi Party, or the National Socialist Government Workers' Party, emerged in the aftermath of World War I and the Treaty of Versailles, which placed significant political and economic restrictions on Germany. These conditions created a sense of frustration and disillusionment among many Germans who were struggling with widespread unemployment, poverty, and political instability. The Nazi Party emerged as a far-right nationalist movement aimed at restoring Germany to its former glory and building a strong, unified state. The party's founder, Anton Drexler, was a locksmith and a member of various right-wing groups who had become disillusioned with the lack of success of these groups in achieving their goals. He began to hold meetings with other like-minded individuals to discuss their shared grievances and the need for a new political movement. It was one of these meetings in January 1919 that Adolf Hitler, a former soldier and self-proclaimed artist, first encountered the party. He was drawn to the party's nationalist and anti-Semitic ideology, which blamed Germany's problems on supposed Jewish and Marxist influences. Hitler quickly rose through the ranks of the party, becoming its propaganda chief and helping to refine its message and tactics. The party's early members were a mix of former soldiers, nationalists, and members of various right-wing groups. They shared a common desire to restore German pride and power, and saw the party as a means to achieve this goal. Many of the party's early members were also drawn to its violent and confrontational tactics, which included brawling with members of opposing political groups and disrupting their messages. Despite the party's early successes in attracting members, it struggled to gain traction in Germany's political landscape. It faced stiff competition from other nationalist and right-wing groups, as well as from established political parties that had greater resources and support. Furthermore, its extremist ideology and tactics made it a pariah in many political circles, and it was often dismissed as a fringe movement with little chance of achieving any of its goals. However, the party's fortunes began to change in the early 1920s as Germany's economic and political conditions worsened. The country was hit hard by hyperinflation and the Great Depression, leading to widespread poverty, unemployment, and social unrest. This created a fertile ground for the Nazi Party to exploit, as it offered a clear and forceful message that resonated with many Germans who were struggling to make ends meet. In 1923, Hitler attempted to seize power through a failed coup known as the Beer Hall Putsch. The coup was a disaster for the party, as many of its leaders were arrested and jailed. However, it also gave the party a new level of notoriety and publicity, which helped to attract new members and supporters. In the years that followed, the party continued to grow in popularity and influence, fueled by its anti-Semitic and nationalist message, as well as Hitler's charismatic leadership. By the early 1930s, the party had become one of the largest and most powerful political movements in Germany and Europe, with a significant following among the working class, farmers, and small business owners. The rise of the Nazi Party to power in the 1930s was a momentous event in world history, with profound consequences for the rest of the world and Europe. The Nazi Party was able to gain power through a combination of propaganda, intimidation, and alliances with other groups. The party's propaganda machine was led by Joseph Goebbels, who understood the power of media and used it to great effect in spreading the party's message. The party's newspaper, the Volksstimme, was one of the most widely read publications in Germany, and its radio broadcasts and newsreels reached millions of people. The party also used posters, flyers, and other forms of advertising to promote its message. The party's propaganda was designed to appeal to a wide range of people, including workers, farmers, and middle-class Germans. The party promised to restore Germany's pride and power, and to create a new and unified Germany. It also used anti-Semitic and nationalist rhetoric, blaming Germany's problems on supposed Jewish and Marxist influences. The party's message was simple and direct, and it resonated with many Germans who were struggling awfully with economic hardship and political instability. Intimidation was another tactic used by the Nazi Party to gain power. The party had its own militia, the SA, which was responsible for much of the violence and intimidation that occurred during the party's rise to power. The SA was a paramilitary organisation that were used to disrupt the meetings of other political parties, to attack and intimidate their members, and to spread fear and terror among the German population. The party also had a secret police force, the Gestapo, which was used to monitor and control the population. The Nazi Party also formed alliances with other groups in order to gain power. One of the most important of these alliances was with the German National People's Party, a conservative party that had a significant following among the middle class and rural Germans. The DNVP was attracted to the Nazi Party's anti-Semitic and nationalist message, and saw it as a means to achieve its own goals. The two parties formed a coalition in 1933, which allowed the Nazi Party to gain a majority in the Reichstag, the German parliament. The significance of Adolf Hitler's appointment as Chancellor cannot be overstated. It was a pivotal moment in the Nazis' rise to power, and it allowed the party to consolidate its grip on the German government. Hitler was able to use his position as Chancellor to create a one-party state, in which all other political parties were banned and their members persecuted. He also used this power to establish a dictatorship in which he had complete control over the government and military. Hitler's appointment as Chancellor was made possible by a combination of factors. One of the most important of these was the political and economic instability that existed in Germany at the time. The country was facing a severe economic crisis with high levels of unemployment and inflation. The political system was also in disarray, with no single party able to gain a majority in the Reichstag. This created a climate of fear and uncertainty, which made it easier for the Nazi Party to gain power. Another factor that contributed to Hitler's appointment as Chancellor was his own personal charisma and leadership skills. He was a very effective public speaker, and he was able to inspire his followers with his vision of a new and unified Germany. After the Nazi Party came to power in Germany in 1933, they quickly implemented policies and took actions that would have far-reaching consequences. One of the most infamous of these policies was their persecution of the Jews and other minority groups. The Nazis believed that the Jews were the source of all Germany's problems, and they were determined to rid the country of them. The persecution of the Jews began almost immediately after the Nazis came to power. In 1933, the Nazi Party began a campaign of boycotts against Jewish-owned businesses. This was followed by the passing of the Nuremberg Laws in 1935, which stripped Jews of their citizenship and forbade them from marrying non-Jews. The Nazis also confiscated Jewish property, and many Jews were forced to flee the country. In 1938, the persecution of the Jews reached a new level with Kristallnacht, or Night of the Broken Glass. This was a coordinated attack on Jewish businesses and synagogues, and it resulted in the deaths of hundreds of Jews and the destruction of thousands of Jewish-owned businesses and homes. The persecution of Jews continued throughout the 1930s, and it culminated in the implementation of the final solution in 1941. This was the plan to exterminate all Jews in Europe, and it resulted in the deaths of 6 million Jews in the Holocaust. In addition to the persecution of the Jews, the Nazis also targeted other minority groups. They viewed anyone who did not fit their idea of a master race as inferior, and they were determined to rid the country of these groups as well. This included homosexuals, the disabled, and Roma people, among others. Another key policy of the Nazi Party was the invasion of other countries. The Nazis believed in the concept of Lebensraum, or living space, and they believed that Germany needed more territory in order to sustain its population. This led to the invasion of several countries in the years leading up to World War II. In 1936, Germany reoccupied the Rhineland, which had been demilitarized by the Treaty of Versailles. This was followed by the annexation of Austria in 1938, which was achieved through a combination of political pressure and military intimidation. The invasion of Czechoslovakia followed in 1939, and this was achieved through the Munich Agreement, in which Britain and France agreed to allow Germany to annex parts of the country in exchange for a promise of peace. But of course, this promise was broken just a few months later with the invasion of Poland, which marked the beginning of World War II. World War II was one of the deadliest and most destructive conflicts in human history. The war involved the majority of the world's nations and resulted in the deaths of millions of people. The conflict lasted from 1939 to 1945 and ultimately led to the fall of the Nazi Party. It began on September 1st, 1939, when Germany invaded Poland. The invasion was preceded by months of diplomatic tension between Germany and other European nations, and it was the culmination of Hitler's aggressive and expansionist policies. Hitler believed that Germany needed more living space and had been building up his military forces in preparation for a war of conquest. Britain and France had promised to defend Poland in the event of an attack, and they responded to the invasion by declaring war on Germany. This marked the beginning of World War II. Over the next few months, Germany quickly overran much of Europe, including Denmark, Norway, Belgium, and the Netherlands. Germany's military successes in the early years of the war were due in larger part to the use of blitzkrieg tactics. These tactics involve rapid, coordinated attacks by tanks and infantry, followed by the swift occupation of enemy territory. The German army was also highly motivated and well equipped, and they had the advantage of surprise in many of their early campaigns. However, Germany's success was not unlimited. They failed to conquer Britain in the Battle of Britain, and their invasion of the Soviet Union in 1941 ultimately led to their downfall. The war in the East was a brutal and costly conflict that drained German resources and manpower. The turning point of the war came in 1942 with the Battle of Stalingrad. This was a major battle between Germany and the Soviet Union that lasted for several months. The battle was fought in the streets of the city, and it was one of the bloodiest of the war. Eventually, the Soviet Union was able to defeat the German army, and the battle marked the first major defeat of the German army. The defeat at Stalingrad marked a turning point in the war, as it showed that the German army was not invincible. The Soviet Union was able to take the offensive and push the German army back, leading to a series of defeats that ultimately led to the fall of the Nazi Party. The defeat of the Nazi Party was a long and bloody process that involved battles on many fronts. The turning point of the war in Europe came with the Allied invasion of Normandy on the 6th of June 1944. This was a major amphibious assault on the beaches of Normandy, and it marked the beginning of the liberation of France. The Allied forces continued to push the Germans back over the next several months, and they eventually reached Germany itself. By April 1945, the Soviet Union was closing in on Berlin from the east, while the Western Allies were advancing from the west. In the final days of the war, Hitler committed suicide in his bunker in Berlin. His death marked the end of the Nazi Party's leadership, but the war continued for a few more days until Germany finally surrendered on May the 7th, 1945. The Nazi Party's reign of terror had a significant impact on Germany itself. The country was left devastated by the war, and the Nazi Party's actions left deep scars. The country was divided, with many Germans feeling guilty and ashamed of their past. The country had to face the reality of the past. The country had to face the reality of its past and to take responsibility for the atrocities committed by themselves and the Nazi Party. The legacy of the party is still felt today. The atrocities committed by the party have left deep scars on the world, and the memory of the Holocaust is still a painful reminder of the consequences of hatred and bigotry. The world has attempted to remember and learn from these atrocities in a number of ways. One of the most significant ways the world has attempted to remember is through education. Many countries have implemented Holocaust education programs in schools to ensure that future generations understand the consequences of hatred and bigotry. The world has also attempted to remember the Holocaust through memorials and museums. The Yad Vashem Holocaust Memorial in Jerusalem, Israel, and the United States Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. are just two examples of institutions dedicated to remembering the atrocities committed by the Nazi Party. In conclusion, the legacy of the Nazi Party is one of atrocity and chaos, and it gladly came to an end in a swift way. Thank you guys for watching.